not just about the platforms themselves.
To the preservation of the national unity and democratic stability.
Water is life, water is an essential service, and we must have to carry out the residents.
Local communities are not only vital to the growth of society, but they also form the bedrock of humanitarian development.
Hello and welcome to this edition of The Reporter. Don't forget, The Reporter is a news and current affairs program that goes beyond the headlines, bringing reporters from the field to give first-hand accounts and in-depth analysis of unfolding issues, correspondence perspectives, ensuring balanced, credible and comprehensive storytelling. I am Anita Patrick, always here to grace your screen with all the happenings in Nigeria and around the world. But let's start quickly with the issue on revenue rise. Federal Inland Revenue Service says government borrowing will continue as part of Nigeria's long-term economic strategy. The executive chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Zach Adedeji, made this known while addressing State House correspondents in Abuja that borrowing should not be seen as a weakness but as an integral part of the country's fiscal plan. Our correspondent Uyi Agbumofegbe has the details.
The executive chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Zach Adedeji, explained that every national budget is built on a mix of revenue, expenditure, and borrowing. According to him, loans are not used for salaries, but for investments that will serve future generations, such as infrastructure projects. Adedeji insisted that borrowing remains essential to balance revenue gains with long-term national development goals.
By that time, we will have harmonized all the taxes, reduction in corporate tax rates, budget and spending reforms. Mr. President just finished meeting now with National Assembly to make sure that now that the fundamental is set, how do we have or continue to have the budget that works for all Nigeria?
The FIRS boss explained that federal revenue collection rose sharply to 3.64 trillion naira in September 2025, a 411% increase from 711 billion naira recorded in May 2023. He noted that the jump was largely driven by higher non-oil income, streamlined tax reforms, and improved compliance.
The total accretion to Federation as at May 2023 is 711 billion. That is what we made. As of September, which is last month, you will see the total accretion is 3.6 trillion. That is increase of 411%, which is just as a result of the economic reform decision that Mr. President has taken. And then when
Adedeji maintained that with reforms already boosting collections, borrowing will continue to complement revenue growth, a move he says is necessary to secure Nigeria's long-term economic stability. Uyi Agbumofegbe, reporting for Global TV News.
Interestingly, today on The Reporter, I have all my reporters in the house and they'll be joining me in the studio. Right now, let's see how our correspondent who's been on that field to follow up on that conversation. Uyi is live here with me. Uyi, how you doing? Let's find out from Uyi what's been happening. You know, recently the National Assembly were backing the borrowing scheme of the federal government and said it was around to ensure that economic reforms is put into place. And now it's coming from the FIRS. Let's join into this conversation and find out from you, basically, because you're on the field. How is the Federal Inland Revenue Service justifying continued borrowing as part of Nigeria's long-term economic strategy, in line with what I just said in regards to the National Assembly?
Okay, again, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, Anita. One of the things that Dr. Zach Adedeji has established here is that, I mean, he used a very interesting sort of example. He said up until when President Bola Tinubu came into office, our tax system in this country, especially from a policy standpoint, was like someone driving a Beetle.
Okay.
So what the government, the last 2 years and counting, has tried to do is to move it and make it become like a Tesla. Yeah, I mean, that's what he said.
Okay.
But here's the real message in that. He's saying that the government has now successfully, to a very large extent, galvanized the tax policy in such a way that it is no longer, if you like, staccato, as they say, it's no longer scattered all over the place. It's such that they're better streamlined, better coordinated, and of course, better midwifed. That's one point. The other point he also made very clearly was that the government is not borrowing to pay salaries. The government is borrowing to invest, and then of course drive the renewed hope agenda of this government under the leadership of President Bola Tinubu. After that, he also talked about how that government is ensuring, on a very deliberate note, that borrowing is sustainable. Okay. All right, in such a way that you're not just borrowing without looking at the implications. So you're doing a couple of things. First, you already understand the implications of borrowing, and two, you understand as well, and you're very persuaded that this is the kind of borrowing that is sustainable in such a way that you can tie value to whatever it is that you're borrowing. Exactly. And he also, on the final note, said that starting from January 1st next year, all of these dividends from these efforts being made on the tax front, all right, will come to fruition, and Nigerians will not only see, they will be part of the enjoyment.
I hope it becomes enjoyment, because I remember when the tax reform came up at the National Assembly, it brought a lot of controversies, there were fears, and now here we are talking about the issue of borrowing and backing, saying that is in line with infrastructural facilities and putting it into the economic drive. But what does he mean when he says borrowing should not be seen or viewed as a weakness? What does it really mean in that context?
I'd like to, well, I can't read into his mind, but I'd like to take it for granted that what he's saying is that he's trying to disabuse the minds of people who believe that we're being a bit, if you like, rascally about where we borrow. We are not being responsible in our borrowing. So he's saying that we're not borrowing because we're weak or because, I mean, from a point of disadvantage, all right? We're borrowing because we have need for it. And for the short and long term, we're borrowing for investment. In other words, it will yield dividends on many fronts. That's the point. Because if you realize, Anyete, there had been a point a few years ago under the same APC government, but then it was late former President Muhammadu Buhari, where there had also been talks about borrowing to pay salaries. This was particularly a big conversation in 2016 when you had Kemi Adeosun as Minister of Finance. So long and short of the story is Dr. Adedeji is saying that, look, we're not borrowing because we're broke, so to speak. We're borrowing because we need to ramp up development, especially from the standpoint of infrastructure. Okay,
if he says so, no, we don't have any points to drag with him, because he's on the point of income, because we look at the IGR and all, how it benefits to Nigeria. If he's saying it works for us, then we'll stick to it and see the long run if that pays off for us.
Of course.
All right. Thank you so much, Uyi, for being a part of the reporter. You know, you're always amazing at that. Let's quickly move away from Uyi and the issue around that particular borrowing story. I also tell you that Nigeria's major oil unions have raised the alarm over the federal government's plan to sell stakes in joint venture all assets and amend the Petroleum Industry Act. The union warned that the sale of the assets could cripple the nation's economy and endanger its future. Ramsey Enokagbo has the details.
Solidarity! Solidarity! The Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, NUPENG, and the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, PENGASSEN, rejected government's proposal to offload its shares in joint venture oil assets. At a joint world press conference in Abuja, PENGASSEN President Festus Usifo says selling the assets amounts to mortgaging Nigeria's future, weakening the naira and putting the economy at risk.
Our members, today NUPENG and PENGASSEN constitute the highest workforce in NNPC Limited. If we allow this to go unchecked, if we allow this to continue the way they are planning it, it has a way of making NNPC become bankrupt in the next few years down the line.
The unions also condemn move to amend the Petroleum Industry Act, faulting plans to remove the Ministry of Petroleum from NNPC Limited's ownership structure. They argue such changes would destabilize the national oil company and scare off investors.
need a petroleum economist to tell us what is going to happen to us as a country. More so, why are we crying? Why are we shouting? Because if this happens, NNPC Limited will not be able to meet the yearnings and the welfare of our members.
NUPENG President Williams Akporeha accused government of pursuing short-term revenue at the expense of long-term stability. He questions why assets should be sold after subsidy removal had already increased inflows into the Federation account. He said any attempt to sell off assets or weaken NNPC is not just bad policy, but a dangerous gamble with the nation's future.
To this, as industry players, as workers in the industry, we said no. That government must give a second look at the proposals that are being brought before them. That it's not the interest of Nigerians, it's not the interest of the industry that these assets are sold.
Both unions urged President Bola Tinubu to intervene, insisting government should focus on boosting crude production, improving infrastructure, and securing investor confidence rather than stripping NNPC of its powers. Ramsey Enoch Agbo reporting for Global TV News.
And I have Ramsey Agbo, who is here to give us all the details we know about that particular report. Ramsey, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Anita.
Well, there's a lot of conversation around all of this. How do you think the oil unions justify their fears that selling stakes in the joint venture oil assets could cripple Nigeria's economy and endanger its future?
I think it's very clear, it's very obvious, and of course they have a standpoint. And one very serious thing that stood out for me is when the NUPENG president was speaking, Pengasem president Osifo was speaking, and he said something very vital.
Okay.
He said what they are talking about right now is not even all about the oil staff alone. You know, it's a union. He says not just speaking for the staff, the union members, the comrades alone, but what about Nigerians? Because when it has to do with our oil, one of the national treasure that we have in Nigeria is the oil. Just this evening on the desk, the analyst was saying the oil is boosting our economy to an extent right now, since the invention of Dangote refinery. Then what will happen if the stake is being sold to individuals? It means the government will not have anything. And who is the government? Is the people. And he said something very vital. He said, if the previous administrations that came and went out sold this before this administration, what would have happened? Everybody saw it, and they saw how viable it is as our only natural resource that is so open, and somebody is coming to say, want to sell the stake. So it's going to cripple the economy because you know what the oil contributes to our GDP, the economic growth on a daily, even at the international market, get to OPEC and all of that. So
that's what the concerns have been about.
That's the concern.
Well, that's one side, because they are speaking for the people, for the masses, as the union body. But let's come back home to look at the implications. What are the implications of amending the Petroleum Industry Act at this time, and how might this affect workers and the nation's oil revenue? Looking at all of this, because they're fighting that this should not be sold, and I'm looking at the workers themselves. If this needs to be amended in terms of the PIA, if we amend the PIA, how is this going to affect it, basically, the revenue?
It's going to affect the revenue, because this revenue at this point is going to get into the hands of individuals. And at this point, you know what I'm talking about. You know how it is. Look at, this is not even privatization. This is even different from privatization. This is not privatization per se, you know, because what they intend doing is still selling. It's just like selling out. It's just like selling out. And what is the implication of this? It means Nigeria is going to be left with nothing when you want to talk about oil.
As a nation.
As a nation.
Okay.
And you know, the standpoint now is, why do this? All right.
At this point
in time,
when enough economic issues arise,
what we should be thinking about is thinking about increasing production. You know, having more production, getting to export this product and make more money for the country.
Okay.
You know, instead of even thinking of increasing production, how a refinery will work. The only thing that we have before now, if you are working with the oil companies, oil sector, you say, yeah, well,
big boy,
you know, so all eyes on this oil sector. So I don't think this is the right thing to do.
Okay.
Not in fact, it shouldn't be done at all, because it's been there, and it's important for it to be there for generations to come.
All right, that's Rams is giving us in-depth analysis to the fact that there will be a lot of effects if this is done at this point in time, because it's not the right call to make at this time. Thank you so much, Ramsey Enoch, for being a part of the reporter.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move away from Ramsey and tell you all the stories. Making that we move to the legislature. Well, it's no longer news right now that Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has officially resumed her duties at the National Assembly after a 6-month suspension. The Kogi Central lawmaker walked back into the Senate amid cheers from supporters, waving banners and chanting songs of solidarity. This came shortly after Senate authorities reopened her previously sealed office. Global TV Senate correspondent Topsy Gimba completes the story.
Kogi Central lawmaker Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan was suspended in March following a heated clash with Senate President Godswill Akpabio, who accused her of unparliamentary conduct. Speaking to reporters after reclaiming her seat, the senator declared she has no apology to render. She described her return as a triumph for democracy principles and stood firm on her conduct during the incident that led to her suspension.
Sometimes it's good to put the institutions to test. We can't cow down in the face of injustice. No one is more Nigerian than us. Senator Akpabio is not more of a senator than I am. He's not a governor of this place. And he treated me as if I was his servant, or I was a domestic staff in his house. It's very unfortunate that at this time, after so many years of democracy, we would have a National Assembly be run by such dictatorship. It's totally unacceptable. As for me, I'm glad to be here, and even though we have been illegally suspended, no day have I hesitated in effectively carrying out my duties as a senator of Kogi Central to the very best of my capacity.
Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's return marks a significant moment of reconciliation and a statement on upholding democracy within the Senate. Topsy Gimba, Global Television News.
Well, that's an interesting one because a lot of concerns have been raised around Natasha. Well, joining me live now in the studio is our Senate correspondent, Topsy Gimba. It's good to have you in the studio, Topsy.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. It's actually an interesting conversation because the legislature has a lot playing out. But what does the Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's return to the Senate after 6 months of suspension mean for representation in Kogi Central at this point in time?
Yeah, of course, her case has been long-standing in the public domain, and being a female, people showed some kind of empathy, sharing the pain with her. And so when it became so obvious, because she was suspended in March this year to make 6 months, yesterday sort of. So when it was obvious for her to come back, but before then, you know, it has been a long-standing battle between her and the senators, where they felt she wasn't meant to come back at the time. But because she was really fighting to see to the end of this matter, you know, went further by seeking so many ways of seeing how best that matter could be resolved. But at the end of the day, it didn't turn out to be. And so the 6 months had to actually start and to end like the way they ended. So most people became so joyful, happy seeing her resuming in her office yesterday, as a matter of fact. But again, it has been a very long issue. The issue of gender became a dominant factor, feeling that maybe as a woman, she has been subjugated to the background simply because of her gender. But that's not the issue, because you all know, you come from the National Assembly, you all know that they are guided by their rules
of the house,
of how they operate. And anybody that comes in there, there's always an induction. As soon as you win the election, They give an induction, giving you the way things are supposed to be done. Nobody gets up to say anything. Nobody puts up his hand without the presiding officer allowing you to do that. And so the seats are changed when maybe a member or a senator has even left the party that brought him to the Senate. And so when he or is changing the seat, change the party, the seat is only changed. Well. And when you are appointed to become a ranking member or either a president officer, you move the seat. So it wasn't very quite difficult for that to happen. And I wonder why she felt her own was so different, because long before then we had similar kind of cases. And everybody moved as soon as the Senate president asked you to move. Okay, well, for her supporters, it feels her supporters and constituency have been agitating for too long, because like you mentioned, it wasn't just a gender issue, it was the issue that has to do with the rule of the Senate and how the Senate operates. Basically, let's just quickly wrap up with how are supporters and constituencies likely to influence her renewed role in the national stand right now, because her role has just been renewed. Yeah, sure. Because it's been 6 months out of the whole activity in the Senate. Yeah, absolutely. They are feeling so great. It's not just easy for you to miss your representative either in the House or in the Senate for a period of 6 months. And so many things, went under the water with their absence there, as a matter of fact. So there's this huge happiness on their faces with the fact that the person they chose to represent them as a senator has finally gotten herself back to that position. Well, thank you so much, Tomsey, for that particular one, because there you have it. With the clamor for women affirmative action, I hope this changes the narrative and speaks tall for her going forward. Thank you so much, Tomsey, for being a part of the program, The Reporter. Let's move away from the legislature and tell you other stories happening on the foreign scene. In Malawi, President Lazarus Chakwera has conceded defeat in last week's election, clearing the way for opposition candidate Peter Mutharika to return to power. The announcements came even before the Electoral Commission released final results on that. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Mukhtar Kasim reports on that.
Chakwera, who first came to office in 2020 after defeating Mutharika, acknowledged in a national address that his rival had built what he called an insurmountable lead. The 70-year-old leader from Malawi Congress Party faced mounting criticism over the economy, with soaring inflation, rising food and fertilizer prices, and accusations of mismanagement dominating the campaign.
Fellow Malawians, 2 nights ago, the Malawi Electoral Commission announced the validated results of the presidential election from 11 councils, bringing their total to 24, with only the results of 12 councils remaining. From those official results, it was clear that my main rival, His Excellency Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika of the Democratic Progressive Party, had already secured an insurmountable lead and is the presumptive winner of the presidential election.
The president's 5th year in office was marked by economic turbulence in the largely rural, agricultural-dependent nation. Analysts say voters' frustration over the cost of living and job creation fueled Mutharika's comeback. Now, as Malawians await the official declaration of the results, Chakwera's concession has set the stage for a smooth handover and a new chapter in the country's democratic journey. Mukhtar Kasim, reporting for Global Television News.
Well, my foreign affairs correspondent is asked to have to join me live via call because he couldn't get in here on time. Obviously, he's on a foreign scene. But let's ask Mukhtar Kasim if he can join us. Mukhtar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Aniti.
Okay. Well, there's a whole lot happening in Malawi, and we want to find out from you, what does President Chakwera Elias concession mean for Malawi's democratic process and the political stability in the country there?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Anita. I can tell you this is a very powerful signal of maturity in democracy in Malawi. Any concessions is not something we see in Africa and in Southern Africa in particular. So this has really sent a strong message of commitment to powerful transfer and respect for institutions. And also it builds credibility to the image of Malawi as a nation in the Committee of Nations, because this, like I said, is not something we see every day. And beyond Malawi, it has actually sent good precedents to other African countries, because we've seen situations where leaders would lose election and also holds to power. But this concession by the president is a good step in the right direction, and other leaders in Africa can take a cue from this and also not hold to power when they've lost elections.
Well, I wish other African countries can take a clue, but let's quickly take this last one before I let you go. How is the opposition candidate Peter Mutharika preparing to return to power, and what are the immediate reactions from citizens and stakeholders? On a quick one.
Yes, Mutharika over the months and even years has been, don't forget he was in power before now. He was in power from 2014 to 2020 before he lost power. So he has been campaigning because the major issues in the country is inflation. Their economies are in shambles, and he's saying he is ready to come back from his manifesto to fix the economy. So this is what he has promised them. He has promised to restore stability, tackle inflation, and also corruption. So these are things he has said he would do, and we believe maybe if he's in power, these are things that he would set to achieve.
Thank you so much.
Citizens have been having mixed reactions. Some of the citizens have expressed frustration with the previous administration, saying they made plenty promises, but they could not deliver. So they see this person who has been there before. They feel, even though he has issues about corruption, but he's an experienced hand, and the country was in a better state previously. So they are saying going back to him is a show of return to stability in the country's economy and also political system.
Thank you so much, Mukhtar. I'll have to call you to wrap up on that point. Thank you so much for that in-depth breakdown. So that's happening in Malawi there. Well, it's been an amazing time here on The Reporter, where we brought to you all the happenings from the federal government's perspective to borrowing and to the selling of assets. And also we brought to you the resumption of Natasha Akpoti. And there you have also the issue around Malawi's election and the president stepping down and conceding to that. Well, that's the much we can take on the program, The Reporter. I hope you had an amazing time with us with in-depth analysis from the field. We say a very big thank you for being a part of the programming. Well, for us, we say stay connected to Global Television, which is on channel 365 on DSTV and 276 on Star Times. To stay connected, kindly also follow us on all our social media platforms now showing on your screen using @Global TV NG. Until the next time when we come your way, I am Anita Patrick. Bye for now.
Be mindful of how we use social media. It's not just about the platforms themselves.
To the preservation of the national unity and democratic stability.
Water is life, water is an essential service, and we must have to carry out the residents.
Local communities are not only vital to the growth of society, but they also form the bedrock of humanitarian development.